Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and we're going to skip the ad reads because I hate them and I suck at them, and you're not going to listen to them anyway, and we're going to dive right in. Today, I have the special opportunity to interview one of my clients. Alistair and I have been working together over a year now. Been through a lot of different phases of training, different phases of pushing training, rehabbing, taking time off for different procedures. And I wanted to have him on the podcast because his life story is quite unique. He's been fit his entire life. And I think we forget often that we're coaching people. And the more we can learn about people, their stories, and how we interact with them, the better results we can get. And I mean, it's not every day you get to work with a vascular and interventional radiologist who's on the board of his company and has lived this life, lived in South Africa, and all the things that you've traveled through in your life's journey. So thank you very much for joining me.
I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
It's my pleasure. So let's dive in like right off the bat. Obviously, you've had different phases of fitness within your life. Where did fitness start for you?
Yeah, I think neither one of my parents were really the fittest. I never saw them exercising. And so for me, fitness started when I was roughly 18,
Mhm.
transitioning out of high school. I was a pretty lean kid. I'm a quarter inch under 6'7". So coming out of high school, I was 187 pounds. And when you're 18, you want to attract females.
Oh yeah.
And so for me, I just said, okay, I want to get strong. I want to get fit because I think at the time it's going to make me, more appealing to females. And it's really transitioned so different through courses of my life and what has kept me exercising and I laugh really at the mindset I had back then, but it at least was a springboard to like say, okay, what does it mean to exercise, to be healthy, and
Mhm.
to really just what does that look like? And again, it's very different depending on when and where you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about motivation, especially when it comes to coaching, because a lot of clients will hire you because they're not motivated, and they're looking for the coach to kind of instill that within them. And then there's this whole narrative on the back end of, oh, you need to be internally motivated, and you have to want to do it for yourself, and we have to find your deep why. But at the end of the day, the friction to get started is always the highest. Like that initial inertia to actually start something is the highest. So whatever fuel that I can use to get someone to get moving. So in your case, obviously getting girls is only going to be a valuable fuel until you find your wife. And then what are you going to do at that point?
Right. And I think too, this getting girls thing, really, I would say that was my fuel for the first year.
Okay.
And what I started to find after that is, there was a lot of things in my life that I needed to try to balance. And I found that when I was lifting, number one, I had friends that I had camaraderie with, and we had a common goal towards strength training. And I also found that it made me less anxious, less depressed, and in a sense, it was like my Prozac. I just felt so much better when I was lifting, and really for a day or two after. You just felt so good. You felt your equilibrium was correct. It's a healthy way to express a little bit of just energy
Mm-hmm.
into lifting. And while the form and everything wasn't really that science based at the time, it was the standard bro split,
Oh
and we
yeah.
all just kind of threw up as much weight as possible. I really found a lot of resilience in that, and so I've carried that forward in my life. And for me, I need to show up as my best person
Mm-hmm.
on a day to day basis, and so exercise for me, being healthy, allowing me to feel good about myself and have that energy. It starts with the gym, and that's just where I figured it out. it doesn't really solve all the issues, but it certainly goes a long way in my life. And that has really been the carry forward since I was younger, is just recognizing it's healthy. Um, it's a force for good in my life. And so it's really helped me, whether it's in grad school, medical school, residency, fellowship. I mean, all the way through into my life now.
Yeah, I think you and I have always resonated on the fact that training is a vehicle for personal development, right? That energy that you're expending, that purposeful hardship that you're enduring is teaching you how to endure hardships outside of the weight room. And I wanted to pull back to something that you mentioned. You said initially you kind of found that training allowed you to balance things better. What sort of things were you trying to balance at that point in your life? So we're talking like maybe 19, 20 years old.
I think for me, college was really where I was trying to figure out who I was. I have kind of an interesting childhood. My parents are both South African, so they we moved from South Africa when I was 7, and we basically left behind all my family there. So it was really my mom, my dad, and my sister that came out here. And my parents got divorced when I was 10, and at the time, you really didn't talk a lot about that. And so I ultimately ended up moving in with my dad. And he's a wonderful role model in the sense that he's worked 6 days a week for as long as I can remember. He didn't really throttle it back till he was in his late 60s. But emotional connection, intelligence, sit down and just say, "How are you doing?" It didn't really exist, right? So
Same.
for me to solve problems, it's me going inward. It's me trying to figure out what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be successful? And so when I started college, I always thought, okay, I think medical school is where the direction I want to go to. And I think part of that reason was in South Africa, we had a fairly comfortable lifestyle. And when we moved to America, we couldn't bring any of those finances over. So life was tough. I mean, it was a lot of hand me down clothes. It was lean years. And I just said, I've always wanted to help people, but I also want to be financially in a position where I just never have to worry about that. And so in college, you're just trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean? Who are you? And I would turn to different things where maybe I was life of the party and I was drinking a lot. And I found that really was a pretty toxic pathway for me. And so when you're lifting, when you're strength training, I think for me, the struggle was, how do I be successful in college? How do I balance the social aspect? A lot of pressure to drink. I had a bad relationship with alcohol. I don't know I was an alcoholic, but as probably was by definition of a college kid. Yeah, we drank a
I think
lot.
most are.
And um and then, yeah, just always kind of seeking, what is my identity? And I'll be honest, I don't think I really figured it out until I was probably 36, 37. I don't think
Yep.
that I really sorted out who I was. I think I was a big people pleaser. I always wanted to be life of the party. I always wanted to have people like me. And I think that reasoning behind people wanting to like me just stemmed back from my childhood. I didn't quite have the stable family. I didn't have a lot of family around. It was going inwards. So for me, externally, if people like me, I said, okay, that's an internal projection that I can use.
Hmm.
But when I am in the gym, when I'm healthy, I was like, I just kind of come as I am. And we talk, I'm just talking with friends, like in a non party manner. We're just talking about life, and it's an organic conversation you're having. And so that it just grounded me in that
Hmm.
scenario.
Dude, I resonate really deeply with that because, I did have a mother who was very, let's call it emotionally in touch, but my dad, immigrant from Lebanon, grew up in a civil war. Like there was no discussion of emotion, right? It was Oh, are there no bullets flying around you? Okay, cool. You're not stressed or you're not sad. Are you bleeding? You're not hurt. And what I came to realize was that me pursuing lifting initially was out of, again, seeking external validation. I wanted to get girls. Then it was, oh, well, I'm really interested in this. It was more of a curiosity. And then when I started competing, that for me is where that toxicity with training came in, where I was pushing limits and trying to achieve, not because I wanted to be the best version of me, but because I felt like, hey, if I can be one of the best lifters in the world, I'll be worth something. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap, but training has always been for me in the same way that it was for you, this place where I just felt comfortable because ultimately you can't cheat it, right? There's the old Henry Rollins short essay, The Iron, where he says 200 pounds is always 200 pounds. It doesn't matter if you're happy, sad, 200 pounds is always 200 pounds. And that kind of always stuck with me. And lifting served as an anchor, similar to it did for you, where it anchored me to the habits that later became healthy. It anchored me to a routine. It anchored me to sleeping, eating, all these other healthy habits. But the training itself didn't actually get healthy until probably I was 35 ish, literally right before I tore my quads. Um, and similar to you, I don't think I figured out who I was until a couple of years ago. I'm sitting here at 38 years old and, you know, just now starting to feel like I figured it out. Um, what role do you think lifting played in you figuring it out?
I'd like to think it's a fairly good size of it. I'll be honest. The biggest impact in my life has really been my wife. She's from Tennessee. She is the most emotionally intelligent person that I know. She's a nurse. We met when I was in residency, and she can read me. I mean, she can read me. She can read other people. People open up to her, and so at first, when we would be coming together and just dating, she would always say, I know I know the projection of who you are. You're projecting a tall doctor in shape, but who are you?
Mm,
And man, that made me so uncomfortable. In fact, it would fatigue me. I would get fatigued talking about emotions because she wanted to know who I was, what made me tick. Tell me about your fears. Tell me about your flaws. I just want to know. And I always felt like I just had to project the essence of success. I've made it. Fake it till you make it.
mhm,
And it forced me to really look inward. And it really kind of came to a head when she was competing in Mrs. Colorado early in our marriage. And she had said, when we were doing the pageant, she had said, "Hey, I need you to show up. I don't, try not to drink too much." I drank too much, and we were on the verge of divorce at that time, and I
mm,
just had to look at her, at the time, and it still gets me emotional. I had to look at her and just say, I haven't showed up as a husband who doesn't bring walls and defensiveness, right? I always felt like girls at some point are going to betray you,
mm,
or you just have to have you have to have some sort of barrier around you. Say, hey, if it doesn't work out, it's okay. I've got, I'll be able to do this, or there's always a wall that if this happens, I have that wall. And honestly, you can't bank grief, right? So even if I had the walls and we were to get divorced, the pain would still be there. It's an illusion. It's a psychological coping mechanism you play out in your mind, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have walls up, you're never going to truly be completely vulnerable and open with your wife, right? So we had to go through that, and I had to go through the good in my life and the bad in my life, whether that was alcohol or poor decisions I've made, or why was I doing this? Why was I not being emotionally there for her? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that I think I credit her for just listening, standing by me. And when it was really hard times, yeah, I'd go down. I would strength train for a while. I was competitively cycling and just getting those endorphins. And it just helped to balance it out, because I think if I didn't have that, I would almost certainly have to be on a Prozac, some sort of SSRI, because I just couldn't, I just, internally had so much shame on all this stuff that I just couldn't handle it. And so it allowed me to just check myself. And so in that scenario, it just gave me enough of that leveling edge to get through those hard times.
Dude, I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing this sort of thing, because I think it needs to be, these discussions need to be had, and I resonate deeply with the idea that you hold up walls, and you essentially, it comes down to asking the hard questions, right? Asking yourself, hey, why did I make that decision? And it doesn't even have to be a big fuck up, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh, I drank too much at my wife's pageant and we're on the verge of divorce. It could be, why did I choose to overindulge on that food today? Why did I choose to overindulge in alcohol that night? Why did I choose to skip my workout that day? You can make up excuses all you want, but ultimately there is one true reason why you do those things. And it always comes down to self-preservation. These habits around whether it be procrastination, whether it be dissociation, these are all coping strategies that we develop over time to protect ourselves, whether it be to protect our ego, whether it be to protect us physically or emotionally. At some point, these strategies served us in some way. So to actually sit back and try to break those down, I mean, you could probably speak to this. That's a lot of hard work that goes into it.
It took me about 2 years to sort through everything and to get to a point where I could talk about emotions without drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't want to paint my parents in a negative light, but at least for my mom, a lot of our discussions were always revolved around alcohol. Have some drinks, share some feelings. And my wife just said, the only time you ever really give me emotional availability and tell me how much you love me is when you're drinking. Like, is that a true feeling? I'm like, of course it's a true feeling. But she can't trust that. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame her at the time. So it took about 2 years to kind of figure it out, sort it out, and get to a place where recognizing, yeah, these defense mechanisms, for me, it's very easy for me to not talk about emotions, to just show up. I mean, I, as a physician, including med school, residency, and my job now, I've called out sick once in probably the last 20 years, right? One
Holy
day.
crap.
And that's toxic, right? So I still struggle with that. It's extremely toxic. The mindset of physicians these days, especially when you're a partner, is, hey, you just got to come, you just got to show up. It doesn't matter, because surgeries don't get done. And now, I've been a lot better about saying, look, I can't be in the hospital today. I'll try to work from home,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not safe for me, and it's not safe for my patients. So, that's a hard thing to say. You're admitting weakness. I'm a human, but it's an extremely healthy thing to say. And I think men especially struggle with that. We just do. We just think, hey, we've got to be the anchor. We've got to show up. And again, it's a coping mechanism that gets you far to a degree, and then it, just like you were talking with your training, and then it can turn very toxic in your
Mm-hmm.
life.
Absolutely. One of the things that was coming to me as you were speaking, about how you only spoke about emotions when there was alcohol involved. For me, emotions were always this thing to be fixed. It's like, oh, you're sad, fix it. Oh, you're upset, angry, let's fix it. There was never a desire to understand the motivations behind, like the triggers behind it. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, probably I would say probably 2019, when I first started going to therapy, where I actually started asking myself those questions and getting an understanding of, okay, are my thoughts in line with my feelings? Are my feelings in line with my actions? Is there alignment across all three? And now I find myself in general just very reflective and making sure that if there isn't alignment in those areas, I don't act until I figure out why. Um, call it stoicism, call it whatever you want. It's just, in my opinion, a healthy way of moving through life with purpose. And it's interesting for me to hear you talk about your past, because these are conversations we've never truly had in depth. We've talked about, oh, this is my relationship with food, or this is my relationship with alcohol. And I can sit here and tell you, of all the clients that I've coached, you have one of the healthiest relationships with food and alcohol that I've ever come across. There's so much reflection involved. There's so much of a deep understanding of, I'm doing this and I understand the trade-offs, especially when it came to your back procedure, right? Okay. How is this going to affect me? Is this a behavior that I can tolerate the trade-offs right now, or is it something I need to abstain from? And there's no judgment on your part which decision you make. You just make the one that's best for you. What was like, how has that journey been for you? Because I know we worked on it a little bit, but you came to me very well equipped.
Yeah, I think one of the things that at least when I try to look at conflict or emotions or thought processes, one of the things that I used to have as a good defense mechanism is if somebody, I use this all the time in leadership, and I tell this to multiple physicians. I mean, I'm the section head of our um, interventional radiology group, and I'm also a board member. And so, you're talking about high functioning people, but what I like to tell people is oftentimes I'll give you an example. Let's just say my wife or somebody comes to me and said, "Hey, I feel this about you, or I feel this about X," and I maybe didn't agree with that. And I'd say, well, that's really not the case because of A, B, C, D, E, F, right? I'm basically trying to give them information as to why their emotion is wrong and why they shouldn't think that way. And it shuts people down. It makes them feel not heard.
Mm-hmm.
So now when people come to me, if they say, "Hey, Alistair, you really rub me the wrong way," instead of trying to get defensive about it, I will say, "That's your feeling, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think. It's how you feel. So
Mm-hmm.
let me recognize that emotion. Let me say, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. Let's talk about that." And people feel heard. Their defensive mechanisms go down, and you really can start to communicate with people. And so it's the same thing with alcohol. Like, why am I drinking? It's a social lubricant. It is allowing me, as somebody who has a hard time expressing emotions, to bring that barrier down.
Mm-hmm.
It's an inhibitor of that, and emotions can flow so much more freely. And so for me, that was the crux of it all. Is like it allowed me to like let emotions come out that I typically would have a hard time expressing. So once I start to recognize that, I just said, okay, the way that I have to fix this is I have to start getting comfortable talking about emotions with other people. And if people come to me, hearing them, really going into it, and maybe it takes several times to talk about it. And once that started happening, you start to say, hey, it doesn't fatigue me talking about emotions. And guess what? I don't need alcohol to like bridge that gap. I can tell a friend, "Hey, I appreciate you," or "You're like a brother to me." And we don't need to have several shots or drinks for me to say that. I'm comfortable saying that. And I'm comfortable in just saying, "Look, I don't need to people please all the time. I feel worthy of myself. Of course, I've done things that I struggle with, but my self-worth is there. And if you choose not to like that, that's okay. I don't need to be friends with a million people. It doesn't make me happier. I'd rather have a core group of people that I'm friends with." And that has given me, I think that's really where that relationship happened. With food, I really never really struggled with food, but I translate it the same way. Yeah, if you're, maybe food is your outlet to where you're saying, "Look, when I get stressed, I want to eat. It feels good. It's an endorphin."
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their go-to thing that kind of releases off some of that stress. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but most of us have some sort of negative tendency that we revert back to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, food, I just kind of treated food like alcohol and that is like, hey, just be aware, like, are you ravenous today? Did you eat yesterday? No, I didn't eat as much. Why? Oh, it's because I was really stressed. Did you talk to your wife about it? Did you talk to your friends about it? No. Okay, I need to do that before I start
Mm.
just going into food or alcohol.
You've always been a very goal oriented person as long as I've known you. You've always wanted to know, all right, this is the plan, this is the trajectory, this is where we're trying to end up. You want to be involved in that reverse engineering process of how we're going to get there, and you want to understand everything that we're doing, which honestly for me is the best kind of coaching relationship to have because I love that part. Do you feel like personality wise, having a more controlled approach to the different things that you do has allowed you to be more effective? What I mean by that is like, we've always tracked your macros. You've never done like a intuitive approach or anything like that. You've always tracked all the variables with regards to biofeedback. Is that approach more so like a personality thing, or is that just I need these things in order to be most effective?
Yeah, I think it's a personality thing. I love data. Part of when I used to cycle, one of their metrics is FTP, which is kind of like a measure of power.
Mm-hmm.
It's like watts per kilogram, and it just gives you like it's extremely regimented. And so for me, having just all this data uh, available to me, that's where I thrive. I love it. I love metrics. I love data. Now the con to that is for most people, when they see that, they can say, wow, I mean, you're way more intense than like most people are. Like you track your macros, you're tracking your lifting. You almost never take free meals unless it's very deliberate. So from the outside in, some people can view that as like over the top, right? It
Mm-hmm.
works for me, but I also understand it's going to make some people uncomfortable. Now, I really try not to advertise it. So if I'm at a social outing, I'm not telling people, hey, that's outside of my macros. I'm just like, no, I'm good. I try not to pull out my phone to like, hey, I'm just going to throw this in the macros,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that there's a balance to be had there. I don't always pretend to have the right balance in that. I think it really works well for me. I love data, but I also recognize it does make some people uncomfortable, and so I
Yeah.
don't pretend to say that works for everyone. But for me, yeah, I love it.
I love it too. I think there's a type of person that sees data and gets motivated by it. And then there's the person who sees data and gets overwhelmed by it. And they'd much rather just dig their head in the sand than realize, like, I mean, the same way with emotions, right? You have them in front of you and they can either overwhelm you and you can go to self protective mechanisms and just shut it away, or you can dive in and be like, hey, what can I learn from this? And, for someone like you who's been a high achiever, it's like, well, I'm going to use everything at my disposal to try and be my best. Like, why wouldn't I do this? Especially when it comes to something that you enjoy, like lifting, right? If it's going to help me be a better lifter, if it's going to help me feel better, move better, look better, why wouldn't I want to leverage that?
And I think too, you have to. There's a degree of ego that you. I think when you're working with a coach, you're really the second coach that I've worked with, and my previous coach, I didn't get a lot of feedback on technique or form. It was kind of bulk and then cuts, and it was really hard. And I think when I first started training with you, it was such an emphasis on form, technique, and for a while there, again, there's that slight people pleasing. It's like, hey, I really want to. There's times you're a little reticent to send a video. Like, is this going to look good? Am I not doing it perfectly?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you just have to understand that nobody. I thought I was doing reasonably good for him. I mean, I really did.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back at it now, I'm like, well, there's a reason why I had brachioradialis tendonitis and tricep tendonitis, and it's biomechanical. Or why am I always getting pain with hinge movements? And it wasn't really till you kind of delved into that. Even as somebody who's had anatomy, physiology, we don't get trained on biomechanics of strength training,
Mm-hmm.
basically at all. And so it's very insightful, and I think that for me was tremendously helpful to say, okay, let's really focus on the form. The numbers I'm comfortable with, but the struggle for me has always been like, okay, how do we get the correct form, the correct technique, balance it out, so that I'm not getting injured? And so I think that has always been the thing that I that I appreciate most, but I also struggle with the most sometimes.
Yeah, I totally get that. I have a couple clients who come to mind who just like, I'm like, hey, did you film this? They're like, yeah, but I don't want to send it to you because it's not good. I'm like, that's exactly why you need to send it to me so we can
Mm-hmm.
fix it. And I mean, movement quality. Oh, here's a great discussion point. So one of the challenges that most people run into when they really love training hard is understanding that there are 3 points of failure within a lift. So there's a cognitive failure where you simply give up, right? You can't cognitively stay in the set. There's technical failure where you either don't have the cognitive ability to hold your form, or there's some weak link within the chain that breaks down and causes a compensation where you lose position. And then there's mechanical failure where you literally can't move the weight anymore. In an ideal scenario, those 3 failure points are the exact same. So you fail when you can't hold your technique, so you can't hold tension in the muscle anymore, and you can't produce force, and you're still cognitively in it that you're trying as hard as you can to move the weight, but it just won't move. And in that scenario, all the reps look the exact same. The only thing that changes is the concentric speed until the point where the concentric speed is 0. For someone like you, which was really interesting, is there was a fear around getting injured. So you wouldn't go to mechanical failure. But then there were links in the chain that needed fortifying. So you couldn't get to technical failure late enough in the set and you would break down. And cognitively, again, there's that fear where I can't push to either of these 2 points because I'm scared to get hurt. This is where, for me, I always leverage education. And that's why we put such an emphasis on technique first, so that we could extend the duration that you're able to maintain that technique, keep you pain free so that you can get to technical failure. Because other than the fear around injury, I'm not concerned with you being able to work hard. And I think this conversation is great because we coach people. And until you have that conversation with your client and understand their psychology, it's great that you understand their biomechanics. It's great that you have an understanding of, proper movement patterns. But what's actually going on between that client's ears is what's going to allow them to be successful.
Super important. I mean, my backstory on all of this is in my late 20s, I started having lower back pain, and it really involved hinging.
Mm-hmm.
So bending over, sitting down, any of that would give me pain. And at 29, it was manageable, and it just progressed. And then, really, kind of in my early 30s, I started getting spasming. I mean, things would just lock up, and I would get awful pain, and it was debilitating. I felt as I was going through my 30s, I mean, I'm 46 right now. When I was 42, I was like, I feel my body, aside from my back, feels like I'm in my 20s, 30s. I feel great, but my back feels like I'm an 80-year-old man.
Mm.
And I was like, I just don't understand what is going on. And so it really was working with you on that to figure out, okay, yeah, it's a hinge movement. It's you as a 6'7" guy, like you really shouldn't, unless you're a power lifter, there's no reason to squat. And I just thought, well, you have to squat.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the big three that you have to do, right? Deadlift, squat, bench press. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's your big three. And if you don't do that, like you're not lifting efficiently. And so I was absolutely terrified. I just knew any bent over position would trigger everything. And so you and I worked with that, and ultimately I think we kind of maxed out where I could go with that. And I felt like, look, I have given everything I can. I'm so much better than I was, but there is a small hump that
Mm-hmm.
I have to get over. And so for me, what ultimately was discovered was I had edema in my vertebral bodies, and they call that Basie vertebral pain. And so for people out there that are kind of struggling with lower back pain, there's really kind of two common types. The first is you get narrowing of a neural foramen, so you get nerve pain, right? So that's the classic sciatica. You get pain down the leg, it hurts, or you get focal pain in a facet. So that is often manifested when people bend backwards. That's facet pain.
Mhm.
Basie vertebral pain is where it's worse with sitting and it's worse with flexion or bending over. It's relieved with getting up, walking, and standing. And it comes because as you age, your vertebral body, the discs between them break down and you get edema in there. And that actual vertebral body is causing your pain. So I had to have an ablation for that to treat that. And then it was a long recovery, eight
Mhm.
weeks of almost no lifting and just you and I working through physical therapy. And we can't, and I think they go hand in hand, right? Like, yes, I could have gotten the procedure, but if I would have pressed it too hard, I could have re-injured it. If I wasn't core strengthening and just stretching, I wouldn't have gotten out of the procedure as much as I should have.
Mhm.
And now my back isn't hostile anymore. And now I can do these lifts. Do I deadlift now? No, I don't need to. I
No.
don't take that chance, but I'm not scared anymore. And so that's a real power. And I think we had to work through that. And that only comes through, yeah, intimate discussion points with your coach. And you have to have the right kind of coach who knows a lot about not only strength training but physiology. And wow, this is interesting. He's in an anterior pelvic tilt and he tends to drop his hip with that. That tells me something about his biomechanics, and it really helps to tease out what you need to fix.
Yeah, I think going through my own rehabs along the years, like all the injuries that I've had, you develop a tremendous amount of empathy for people who are experiencing pain. Right? I don't really talk about this often, but like prior to my injury, I had knee pain for probably 15 years. Like even when I was competing at the highest level, squatting over 800, my knees ached 24/7. And it affects your quality of life, it affects your mood, and if you can get someone to a place where that pain is manageable or even gone, the amount of freedom that you give them in their daily life is just tremendous. So as a coach, you have to understand the power that you hold in the sense of the benefit that you can provide the client, not power in terms of like a power dynamic, but like the power you hold to give your client something that otherwise they would not be able to have. Um, you mentioned something earlier on that I didn't circle back to, but I want to now. You talked about your self worth, and you talked about how when you're in a leadership position, you're showing up knowing, you have that self worth. You can give space to people and listen to them, and if they don't like you, for example, you're okay with it because you're okay with who you are. Talk to me about the self worth that comes from doing hard things, whether it be lifting weights, competing in cycling, returning from injury. How have those things served you to be more confident in yourself?
Yeah, I think everybody has to ask their question, why am I doing something, especially long term? Like what is it doing for you? And so when I look at, say, strength training and physique, it's for me. I mean, I just look at it that way. I don't talk to people at work about it. I don't say, yeah, I had a hard set, or I got up early this morning to work out, or hey guys, I've lost 35 pounds. Look at me. I never talk about it ever.
Mhm.
Um, and so that for me is it's discipline and motivation for myself, because it's, again, I can bring my best self. I feel good when I'm lean. I feel I have energy when I'm eating cleaner. And when that when the outside matches the inside, it really can transform your life. You say, hey, look, I feel like I am a good father, um, a good husband, a good leader at work. And the flip side of that is, like, I have the mirror to me and I want to do this. I want to be healthy. At 46, there's not a lot of role models for me out there
Mhm.
that are healthy. And I have a home gym, right? So like my workouts, I don't have anybody else who's looking at it. And I think for me that works better for me because there's no pressure to lift heavy, and instead of saying, well, I want to be technically really sound on this, but I'll look weak if I'm doing this lighter weight. So for me, home gym works great. I can go down at 5 in the morning, which is typically when I go there. I can go without brushing my teeth. I'm just coming as I am, coming raw, whatever shirt I want to wear, right? Like
Oh
I'm
man.
just coming there. I can listen to Swedish death metal, Sabaton, or I can listen to, angry Phil Collins, whatever I want to listen to, right? Like
Yep.
I can listen to it out loud down there. And so, there's power in that. I mean, there really is. And I think that it, if I was just lifting to please other people, to look big, I would ask myself, what is the end point to that, right? Like, when is it enough? And I would say there's always room to improve technique, form, always want to have goals to increase strength.
Hmm.
But also, if you're doing it from the standpoint of trying to prove it to other people, you start having junction points, right? Some people choose to be enhanced, some people don't. I don't judge that route. I mean, I think
Right.
everyone has to make the decision, but why are you doing that is the big question you have to ask yourself. Because if you look at most of the people, like, if, for example, if you're trying to impress girls, I'll give you an example. Chris Bumstead, if you ever have listened to some of his stuff, he talks about his Instagram and social media feed. And somebody once asked him, like, man, you must have just a ton of girls. He's like, actually, if you look at my Instagram feed, it's like 92% men that follow me.
Yep.
It's not girls. And it intimidates most of them. And so in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be big. It's going to get me a lot of girls, or I'm going to kind of press my advantage at work or whatever. I think that only goes so far. And I really think you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you're doing it for you, and whatever that means, you may say, hey, I've got a family history of diabetes, hypertension. My dad died early. Like, I want to be alive for my kids.
Mm.
That's part of my motivation too, is I want to live as long as possible. And so this is one thing that is extremely important. If you look at all the data outside of the obvious of not smoking, drinking, what is the thing that decreases your chances of Alzheimer's, dementia, depression? It's resistance training, not endurance training, resistance training.
Yeah. There's so much to pull from that. The Chris Bumstead thing is funny because I've even asked my wife this, because obviously, like, I've competed in bodybuilding, so I've been off-season power lifter, 260-pound Paul. I've been stage lean, 205-pound Paul. And the funniest part for my wife, I'll be like, hey, like, which body composition do you prefer? And she's like, oh, like somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't want you to be so lean that I can't put my head on your chest because it hurts, but I don't want you to be winded walking around the block with the dogs.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
um, and also, like, you brought it up, and I want to dive into it more. How has your view of fitness changed since becoming a father? Selfishly, this is a very selfish question on my part.
Yeah. So I think you have to look at it as everything is a give and a take, right? So time is extremely difficult for me in the setting of, I have two little boys, a 3 and a 6-year-old. I have a wife where we need a lot of quality time together to have that connection. It's not sitting down and watching a movie. That does nothing for our quality time.
Mm-hmm.
It's walking, connecting, talking.
Mm-hmm.
That's our connection. Plus being on the board, plus being a physician. And so really what I've had to grapple with is I don't have a huge amount of time, so I need to be extremely efficient. And I've had to psychologically reverse my thinking in that I thought, okay, quantity is the biggest driver of success, not quality. So I need to lift chest twice a week in order to get as big a chest as possible. And since I've become a father, I just don't have the time for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I need time where no one's going to interrupt me, and I'm able to just have that time for me. So for me, that's getting up early, right? 4:45, 5, and just going down to the gym. That's my time. It's my protected time. Nobody is really up at that time. And our sessions are about 40 minutes. And then there's about 20 minutes of cardio in there. We do this 4 days a week, right? Sometimes there may be a little cardio on the weekend, but not a terrible amount. And I will tell you, on paper, if you were to rewind 2 years ago, I'd say you're just kind of maintaining. There's probably no gains. I've seen better gains in this last year with you doing that than I have really in my entire career, aside from maybe when I first started lifting and I was going from, a completely novel stimulus to that first year or two is obviously pretty incredible. Even if you're lifting terribly and you're that young, you're going to see great results. But,
Right.
and also, I want my kids to see me working out, right? I bought these foam dumbbells and kettlebells and a barbells,
Yeah.
and they'll come down and they'll push, foam weights with me, and we
That's
do
so
that.
awesome.
And I have I'm fortunate. I've got a reasonable home gym. We've got the free motion, and I'll put like 2 pound weights on that, 2.5 pound weights on that, and they can do flies with me, and I'll get super pumped with it. And they see me doing this, right? So sometimes I deliberately don't work out in the mornings and I save one for the weekend to balance that. And they'll come down, or I'll say, hey, come down, let's go through this. And they love it. And even if they're there for 10 minutes and they're gone, they see that. And now the most recently we had friends over, and Liam's trying to pull his buddy in and saying, hey, let's go lift. And he's in the gym, like, they're lifting this foam kettlebell and just having a blast with it. And even if it's like jumping on like a crash pad or
Yeah.
a Basie ball, like they love it, right? And I just want them to see. I never had that example in my life, and I just want them to carry forward, like, wow, what does Dad do for himself? Okay, he doesn't go off and like hang out with buddies and drink all the time. I mean, he's not absent. But he shows up, and men need that, right? Men need role models. Young boys especially need big male role models, and so what you do, it really translates that you don't think the power that you have. I'll put it this way: you don't recognize how much they're picking up on what you're doing. So if you're coming home after dinner and you're having a drink, they're watching that, whether you know that or not. They're registering that.
Yep.
And so for me, just they can see me working out, they can see me being healthy, and that is huge motivation. I need to be that role model for them because I demand it of myself. And if I'm going to tell them my lesson in life, how I think you can be successful and my way of going about it, I have to model that for them. Even if they choose not to live later in life, at least they've had that exposure.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's something that I actually had this conversation with a newer client of mine. She's a stay-at-home mom, similar situation where she just doesn't have a lot of time in the day. Her husband has like an hour commute back and forth throughout to his work, and he routinely works 10 to 12-hour days. So you're talking, he's out of the house for 12 to 14 hours a day. And she sent me this message about how she's having trouble finding time to work out because the kids nap at different times right now. It's just they're both children are under 2. And I was like, well, listen, let's just say you have to complete all of this training within a week's period. Let's break it up however it needs to be broken up. And if you need to have the kids down there with you and you can only get 10 minutes in, let's get 10 minutes in. So I just threw the word optimal out the window. I was like, we're just going to train. And she sent me this video of her doing planks and her kid just laughing and crawling all over her. And she was like, yeah, having a hard time focusing. Hope these look okay. And my reply back was, these look beautiful. And even though your child cannot recognize what's happening, they will remember that their mom was doing something for herself and is a complete badass. And, she messaged me back saying that the message made her cry and that she never thought about it like that. And I love that you mentioned the example that you set for your kids. Your kids are going to grow up with a father who has a very healthy relationship with food and can enjoy a dinner out with his wife or his family, can, but then also is very measured and tactical with his decisions throughout the week. They're going to grow up with a father who prioritizes his fitness. So they're going to know that that's important. In the ideal world, they teach that to their kids. And so, whatever unhealthy habits that you might have grown up with, whether it be emotionally or physically or fitness wise, you've now broken that chain for your kids. And I think that is, as a coach, when I see that taking place, listen, I've coached NFL athletes. Like there was a period in the late 2010s where I could turn on ESPN any Sunday and see guys that I coach playing. That doesn't compare to what you just said at all.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
when on the subject of optimal, if there was one word that I would strike from the fitness vernacular, it would be optimal, because people talk about optimal from the perspective of perfect, right? The optimal exercise, the optimal split. Well, what's optimal to me is what works and what you can do consistently. Waking up at 5 a.m. and training fasted for the most part. How have you disconnected that part of your brain that's analytical and wants to make the most out of everything with the fact that, hey, this is the only time that I can get for me and I'm going to make the most of it?
I think you have to have as you progress through life. I think one of the biggest learning things that I've ever had to readjust is how is my self-talk to myself. I mean, you
Mm,
talk about that mom who's saying, "Hey, this doesn't look great." You give her great validation, and maybe she changes her perception. So I just look at it and say, "Look, I'm down here. I'm lifting. I'm doing what I can in the time period I can. And if I miss a workout, I don't look at it as, man, you've really failed. I say, okay, I can't work out today. Whatever. I was on call. I'm too tired.
right.
I didn't get enough sleep. I mean, that's an inflection point. There's times I don't sleep at the end of the night, but I say, look, what can I control? I can get steps in today.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a home treadmill. I can eat, I can show up for my diet. I did two of the three things. That was a win today. That was a win.
Right.
And so for me, it's all about how do you talk to yourself? Are you somebody who has great words for yourself? Is like, hey, I'm okay with myself, or I'm working towards this goal. I'm kind to myself. But if you're someone who's like, yeah, I'm not worth it, and I'm, man, I didn't do that set right, and that's going to derail me. I mean, all these discussion points we have with our head can really self-sabotage us. And then when that starts to happen, you say, hey, I need other people to validate that because I'm not validating myself. And
Mm-hmm.
then it starts turning toxic. And it's, why aren't people like noticing my physique? Okay, I need to train harder, and then it burns you out more. Or why aren't people appreciating this at work? And I'm doing all these things and nobody's saying thank you to me, but I'm saying thank you to everybody, and I'm just not getting it from anybody. And I think we live in a society, yeah, where the more successful you get, the lonelier it absolutely can get, because there's less and less people above you to validate you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing with fitness, right? I don't know a ton of 46-year-old guys who are at whatever 14% body fat who are as strict with their macros. And so you have to say, like, what is my self-talk on this? And it's kind, it's forgiving. It's, hey, maybe I can do it tomorrow. Get that workout in. Or you know what? I got 25 minutes. It was supposed to be 40, but look, I just couldn't get to it today, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did what I can. And so for me, it's all about positive self-talk and your relationship with yourself. And if you are kind to yourself, I really think you're going to find it really reflects on multiple other people. They can see like, wow, this person feels good about themselves. They're not coming into social settings and saying, man, I lift all this, or I bought this new car. Look at me. People can spot it a mile away. I
Mm-hmm.
think that when I come into all of these scenarios, I just ask people questions, and they just talk and talk and talk. And maybe they ask you questions, maybe they don't. But like, I'm confident and have enough good self-talk to myself that I can say, it's okay. I don't need to tell them. If they don't want to ask, that's fine. Like, but it tells me a lot about someone's character if they're not asking about you, and you're just asking questions about them.
I have a question, and you can take it in whatever direction that you want, because when I'm speaking to you now, I feel like I'm speaking to somebody who is calm, kind, um, has an understanding of what working hard is, but also working with purpose, uh, gives himself grace. These are not typical attributes that you would associate with somebody who has achieved in their life what you have achieved, right? When you think about a doctor who is on the board and who is the head of his department, you think about some hard-nosed workaholic who probably has a lot of bad like health habits. Do you believe that you would be where you are in your life if you approached life the same way you do now during the climb up to where you are?
Um, that's a difficult question
That's why
because
I
I think
asked it.
everybody, I think everybody in their mind loves the idea of work-life balance. And
Hmm.
really, I think if you, I don't pretend to have all the answers to this, but I will say enough people that I respect, maybe like say Scott Galloway or whomever you want to bring into there, they will say like there are times you just have to work,
Hmm.
and it's very difficult to get work-life balance. And so for me, yeah, I absolutely had to work sometimes to a level of toxicity that I think now I wouldn't tolerate. But you're also seeing a paradigm shift in the generations coming out where they don't want to work as hard initially.
Mm.
Not everyone. I don't want to harp on, oh, young people they're not working as hard. But I see it in my practice. People coming in, they don't want to be partnered. They don't want to be part of that stress and the work commitment that it takes. On some level, I'm extremely amazed by those people because I say, wow, you have the self awareness to know, hey, this can be toxic at times. Um, but I also think life has to be hard. Like if you go
Yeah.
back and say, if I could change this and if I would do it this way, how would it end up? The reality is you wouldn't be you today. And you need times in your life where it's hard. You need
Hmm.
times where like I'm uncomfortable. And it's not always good. And there's a reason when I look at my life now, I'm saying, man, this is, in my opinion, the best time of my life. And I really mean that. Like
Yeah.
today, this time, I wouldn't choose another time in my life to be alive, but I couldn't have that perspective if I didn't go through it, if I didn't have heartbreak on girlfriends or didn't maybe get into like the best med school I wanted to, or things like that. And when I was coming out of fellowship, there weren't a lot of jobs, and I cold called the company I was at, and they didn't have a job, and so I was fully prepared to take a job in. At the time, it was Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I remember my wife at the time crying. She was like, "I don't want to live here," and lo and behold, a month and a half later, the job that I had cold called, that there was no job posting on, they called me to say, "Hey, we've got an opening," right? So I made my own luck in that regard. But
Mm.
we were fully prepared. She was still there to support me. And it was a moment I'm like, hey, she is there. She will support me through that. And all these things add up. And so, yeah, I would approach things differently, but then I wouldn't be who I am today. So, in my opinion, embrace the times that maybe it sucked, or
Hmm.
embrace the things that you struggled with. It makes you human, it makes you grow. And, maybe you've had one girlfriend that you really cared about, and you cheated on her and you lost that. Instead of living in the past with that, just saying, man, I wish if I only would have done this differently, maybe we'd still be together. Again, depression's rooted in the past, anxiety's rooted in the future. Take your next one and say, I won't do that. And you'll find someone and you'll say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. It's a hard line for me. I'm not proud of that. And maybe even talk to her about that, or him, or whatever, and say, hey, like, yeah, I did this in the past, and I'm just letting you know this for me is extremely important. I want you to know that. And I feel like that will give you such a better connection with them or with
Hmm.
yourself than if you just say, and I used to do this. I used to skim over the fact of like all the bad stuff that happened in my life because I felt people wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't like me. It made me less strong and powerful. But I will tell you, the more I share intimate details, when somebody comes to me and said, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'll say, I understand. this happened to me. My God, you connect with people. It gets you
Mm-hmm.
so much further in life than you can imagine if you share personal examples of things in your life that either you've excelled at or you've struggled with. And people are like, wow, you can relate to me. That is showing empathy. You were saying,
Mm-hmm.
I register that. Here is how I understand that. And once you have someone's empathy, I mean, this is how you get ahead. So it's gone from in the past where like, I'm just going to work as hard as I can, be the best doctor, to I think the reason why I'm in my role right now is number one, I prioritize work-life balance. So I preach that to all the docs. And if someone comes to me, I try to just have empathy. And when, it can be a tech that said, hey, this doc kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'll say, okay, yeah, I can understand that. I've had partners do that to me. When I was in training, I had a physician, basically tell me I failed for the day. And I get that, right? And it impacts you. And let me look into this. Let me address it, right? And they feel heard. And so for me, I approach it differently now than I did back then. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you took that. I'm glad you took that and run with it, because I look at the way that I approach life right now, and I think, if I had the 10,000-foot view that I have now and put myself, let's say, 8 years ago, because I met my wife about 4 years ago. So we'll say, like, yeah, 2018, 2019, and how hard I was working to try and build the business. Like you said, there's just some things I just wouldn't tolerate now. Like, I think about the schedule that I was keeping at that time. I'm like, there's no way that I could do that. And then I look at the schedule that I have now and I'm like, there's no way that guy could do this either, because there's so
Right.
many inefficiencies in it. And it's just really interesting to me to ask these questions, because I've actually had 3 or 4 podcasts in a row where I've talked to men in leadership roles, and they've all mentioned the role that their wife plays for them as an anchor. And something that I've said since meeting my wife, I've come to believe, is that the most important decision you make in your life is who you choose to partner with, because it can truly be a catalyst for so much personal growth on your end. When I met my wife, she was 25 years old. And on our first date, I looked at her, I'm like, I have never met a 25-year-old as emotionally intelligent as you. Keep in mind, when we met, I was 33, right? So it's 8-year difference.
Yeah.
And
Same with my wife.
yeah, it's wild. And, I'm so glad that you have that person in your life to, hold your feet to the fire sometimes and say, hey, man, you need to be better.
And
And
I
we
think
step up.
too, if you look at it, I mean, there's pragmatists out there, but if you look at the success of marriage, it's 52% of people get divorced. And then you say, okay, of the 48 that don't get divorced, what percentage are happy? Maybe 20,
Mm,
25, because people just aren't happy. They're staying together for the kids. So it's, yeah, I mean, on paper, it makes no sense. Like, why would you take a 1 in 4 chance of it working out well for you? And on paper, people would say, yeah, you should never get married. But I will tell you, like, that to me, the more you wait in life, the more you understand yourself, the more you understand who's going to work for you. And if you hit if you hit on somebody that is a good wife, a good husband, it to me it's worth the risk to
hmm
do that, because what you bring out of it for the rest of your life is so amazing compared to the mindset of, you know what, I'm okay, I'll be okay alone. I'll it's okay, I can do what I want to do, I'm fine alone.
hmm
And all the science would say it's not healthy. Single people have higher comorbidities. They
Yep.
have lower life expectancy. And same thing with friends, right? Like, I don't really need friends. I've just got my wife. It's like, no, you need friends,
hmm
and we all need that and invest in that relationship. And so it all kind of interconnects. But the person that I would have married at 25 as compared to 35 when I get married are vastly different people. And I'm so grateful that I didn't go through with who I originally was intending on, the path of the type of person that I was going to marry. It was a specific type of girl I would always date. And it wasn't until my wife came along, like, she's different. I need to take a chance on this. I like that. And it paid off.
Hey man, I listen. I did make that mistake, and I can tell you that the relationship that I'm in right now, and the bond that we have, and the life that we've built, wouldn't be possible had I not gone through those experiences. And as you mentioned, at some points in your life, it should be hard because it will test you and it will show you who you are. And I can't thank you enough for sharing a deeper look into the psychology, of someone who is trying to perform at the highest level in every aspect of their life, as a doctor, as a husband, as a father, and as an individual. Because I think, again, as coaches, we need a better understanding of people, and it's something that isn't taught in textbooks. And I'm hoping that conversations like this and the vulnerability that you shared allowed people to seek more understanding, seek more empathy in their relationships. Um, Man, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate
I
the time.
I do have one question. I usually, like, if a coach is coming on the podcast, I'm like, hey, where can people find you? I have a feeling that you're not looking to build your social media platform, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Um, if there was a billboard on the side of the highway with a message for everyone to read as they drove by, what would it be?
I would say there's no day like today.
Mm,
And again, that's just part of, if you're worried too much about what's going to happen, that time hasn't happened. If you're waiting to be happy, you say, hey, when this happens, I'm going to be happy. Um, it may never come for you. And
mhm.
conversely, if you're like, hey, my happy days were 2 years ago when I was with so and so, or I was in college and I was carefree, that's when I was happy. Today, yeah, today is your day. Today is where it's like, what do I have today? Where am I at? I'm alive. I need to be here today. I come home from work, I'm tired, but this is my day to, like, say hi to my kids, tell my significant other I love her, and that's just being grounded in today.
Dude, I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.